I made my daughter's birthday cake from scratch that morning. 3 layers, cream cheese frosting, strawberries on top because she'd asked for it every year since she turned 4. I was still washing the mixing bowls when my sister walked into my kitchen, looked at the cake on the counter, and said, store-bought is just easier, but I guess some people need to prove something. I laughed it off. I always laughed it off. That was my problem. My sister, I'll call her my sister because that's still what she is on paper, even if I'm not entirely sure what she is to me now, had been living in my house for 4 months by then. 4 months. What started as just a few weeks while I get back on my feet had quietly stretched into something I didn't have a name for yet. She wasn't paying rent, she wasn't helping with groceries. She had a full-time job managing a boutique downtown, drove a car newer than mine, and still hadn't mentioned anything about moving out. I hadn't pushed. That was on me. She was my little sister. We grew up sharing a room, sharing clothes, staying up past midnight, watching bad horror movies. There was a version of her I still loved. I kept waiting for that version to show back up. Meanwhile, the version currently living in my guest room left dishes in the sink, used my daughter's shampoo without asking, and had once told my husband that I tended to overreact about small things. He told me that casually, like it was nothing. I filed it away. My husband, I'll just call him my husband here, had been quieter about the whole arrangement than I expected. He wasn't close with my sister, never really had been, but he wasn't pushing back either. When I'd bring it up at night, he'd say things like, "It's not worth the fight," or "She'll figure it out eventually." I took that as support. I should have looked closer. The birthday dinner was supposed to be small. My daughter had just turned 9. She'd asked for spaghetti with the big meatballs, her words, and garlic bread, and the strawberry cake. I'd invited my parents, my sister, obviously, she lived there, and my husband's mom, who drove up from 2 hours away and brought a gift wrapped in so much tissue paper my daughter spent 5 minutes just getting to the box. It was a good evening. For a while. We were at the table, pasta bowls half empty, my daughter telling everyone about her class project on the solar system, specifically how Pluto deserved better. She was animated and bright and a little loud the way she always gets when she's happy. I sat there watching her and felt that particular kind of tired but full that comes with being a parent on a good day. Then my sister made a sound, not a word at first, just a short exhale through her nose, the kind that means something. She was watching my daughter talk, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Amusement? Irritation? Both. Then she said it. She really does have trouble staying on topic, doesn't she? She said it lightly, like an observation, like she was commenting on the weather. I read somewhere that some kids just have a harder time regulating. Like it's wiring. She paused. It's not her fault. The table went quiet. My daughter didn't stop talking right away. She got through half a sentence about Jupiter before she noticed, then she stopped. She looked at my sister. Then she looked at me. I watched my daughter's face shift, that brightness she'd had 2 seconds ago. I watched it recede. She picked up her fork and put it down again without eating anything. She didn't say a word. 9 years old. My mom said, "I think she's just excited. I'm not criticizing," my sister said, smiling. "I'm just saying, it's a real thing. Some kids are wired differently. There's no shame in it." She reached for the garlic bread like she hadn't just said what she said. I had been holding my wine glass. I set it down, very carefully. There's a thing that happens to me when I'm truly angry, not frustrated angry, not tired angry, but the real kind. Everything slows down. I can feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. My voice gets lower, not louder. I said, "Excuse me?" My sister looked up. What you just said?" She did that thing, tilted her head slightly, let her face go soft, the whole performance of someone who is very confused by your reaction. "I was just making an observation. I wasn't being mean. You just implied my daughter has something wrong with her brain at her birthday dinner." While she was talking, I said, "There's no shame in it. She's 9, I said. She was telling us about Pluto." My husband put his hand on my arm, the kind of touch that means calm down. I moved my arm. My mom leaned in and said quietly, "Let's not do this tonight, okay? It's her birthday." And that was the moment I'd lived inside my whole life. Let's not do this. Let's keep the peace. Let's protect the people who don't deserve protecting, while the people who do sit quietly and wait to be defended. My daughter was looking at her plate. I looked at my sister. "You've been living in my house for 4 months, I said. You've used my daughter's things without asking. You've never once offered to cover a grocery run. And tonight at her birthday, you sat at my table, eating food I made, and said something like that about my kid." I paused. "I want you to think carefully about whether you have anything to say." My sister opened her mouth, then she closed it. She looked at my husband. I noticed that she looked at my husband. He looked down at his pasta. "You have until the end of the month," I said. "That's 11 days. I'll help you look for apartments if you need it, but I won't cover your deposit or your first month." That one was for me. I'd been dangerously close to offering both, the way I always used to cushion everything. Not this time. I need you out. My sister's face went red. You're being dramatic. Okay, I said. Mom. She looked at my mom. Tell her she's being dramatic. My mom looked at me, then at my sister. She picked up her fork and said, I think you should start looking, sweetheart. That shocked everyone, including me. The rest of dinner was quiet. My daughter asked if she could have cake. I said yes. We sang happy birthday. She blew out all 9 candles in one breath and said she'd made a wish but wasn't telling anyone what it was. My husband's mom hugged her and told her she was spectacular. She beamed. My sister didn't sing. After my parents left and my mother-in-law went to bed in the guest room, yes, that meant my sister slept on the couch. And no, I did not feel bad about it. My husband and I cleaned up the kitchen. Or rather, I cleaned up the kitchen and he stood near the counter with a dish towel he wasn't using. That was a lot, he said. She insulted our daughter. She didn't mean it like, I put down the pot I was washing. Don't. He stopped. You looked at her, I said. When I said she had to leave, you looked at her before you looked at me. He didn't say anything. That's the 3rd time this week I've noticed that. He set the dish towel on the counter. You're reading into things, am I? The conversation ended there. He went to bed. I finished the dishes. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with a cup of tea I didn't drink, thinking about the way he'd looked at her. The way he'd been less bothered by her presence than made sense. The way he'd said it's not worth the fight every time I'd brought her up. And I'd taken that as him being easygoing when maybe it was something else entirely. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. I found out 12 days later. My sister did leave, to be fair. Not gracefully. She made a point of leaving a passive-aggressive note on the kitchen counter that said, hope you're happy in handwriting. I recognized from birthday cards she'd sent me for 30 years, but she left. I changed the locks the same afternoon. Both doors, all 3 deadbolts, the garage keypad code. I'd been told by a friend to do it immediately. I did it immediately. A locksmith came at 2 in the afternoon, and I stood there while he worked and felt something I hadn't felt in months, which was that this was my house. What I didn't do immediately was look at my husband's phone. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious enough to snoop. I was tired and relieved and trying to get back to some version of normal. But then his phone buzzed on the nightstand while he was in the shower, and the preview showed her name, and it showed enough of the first line that I understood. I didn't pick up the phone. I sat on the edge of the bed and I breathed. When he came out, I asked him to sit down. He knew immediately. I could tell by the way he looked at the phone and then at me. I said, how long? He said, it's not what you think. I said, how long? He said 6 weeks. I later found out it was closer to 3 months, which means it started approximately 1 month after she moved in. I don't know if they planned it that way. I don't know if any of it was planned. What I know is that my sister stood in my kitchen and ate my food and slept in my house and called my daughter neurologically impaired at her birthday dinner while sleeping with my husband. I know that she looked at him across the table when I asked her to leave and he looked down at his pasta. I know what that means now. I called a divorce attorney the next morning. My name is the only name on our mortgage. I've been the primary earner for 6 of our 7 years of marriage. My attorney was very clear about what that meant for the process. I called my mom after that. She didn't sound surprised, which surprised me. She said I wondered. I asked her why she hadn't said anything. She said you never want to be the person who says something like that and be wrong. I understood that. I'd spent my whole marriage not wanting to say something and be wrong. My daughter took it harder than I expected and easier than I feared. She cried the first night, asked if it was her fault, and I got on the floor with her and told her with every cell in my body that it was absolutely not even a little bit, not in any universe. She asked if she'd still see her dad. I said yes, we'd figure that out. She asked if she'd ever have to see her aunt again. I paused on that one longer than she probably wanted. I said, not if you don't want to. She nodded like that was the right answer and then asked if there was any birthday cake left. There was. We ate it at 9:30 at night, sitting on the kitchen floor, which is where my daughter has always preferred to eat things she really likes. I don't know why. I've stopped asking. The divorce took 7 months. It wasn't pretty, but it wasn't catastrophic. We have a custody arrangement. He pays child support, which my attorney made sure was calculated correctly and documented completely. I was not going to be in a position 2 years from now where any of that was ambiguous. He moved out within 3 weeks of me filing. I don't know where my sister is living. My mom told me she moved in with a friend in another part of the state. That felt like enough distance. What I kept coming back to, in the months after everything, was my daughter at the table. The way the light went out of her face, the way she put down her fork. She didn't cry, she didn't argue. She was 9 years old, and she already knew that the best response to being dismissed was quiet dignity, which broke my heart because no 9-year-old should have to know that. She knows other things too. She knows that her mom locked the house and filed the paperwork and sat on the kitchen floor with her and said, "Not if you don't want to." She knows that some people show you exactly who they are at birthday dinners, and the only real mistake is not believing them the first time. I believed my sister. For a long time, I made excuses, smoothed things over, kept the peace because she was family and family meant something. She sat at my table and implied my daughter was broken, and I thought about all the years I'd spent protecting her feelings, all the times I'd laughed things off. All the times I'd said she didn't mean it like that about the same person, to myself over and over, as if repetition made it true. She meant it like that. My daughter is 10 now. She just did her 5th grade science fair project on black holes, specifically on what happens to things that cross the event horizon, which is the point of no return where even light can't escape. She won 2nd place. She was annoyed about 2nd place for approximately 40 minutes and then moved on completely, which is one of my favorite things about her. I have a house with locks I chose and codes only I know. I have a daughter who eats cake on the kitchen floor and argues passionately about Pluto's planetary status and asks enormous questions about the universe with absolutely no apology. I'm not keeping the peace anymore. It turns out the peace was never mine to keep.